You ever get that feeling that history is just repeating itself, not just in big, vague ways, but in these super specific, almost identical patterns? Well, we're about to uncover this incredible, ancient blueprint for how power deals with its enemies, a script that's been used for centuries and is still playing out in today's headlines. Let's start with something that sounds like it was pulled straight from a spy movie.
Just imagine this for a second. A sitting president, the actual leader of a country, is captured, and not in some kind of internal coup, but by a foreign military? I mean, that is a shocking, game-changing headline.
And you just have to wonder, right? Is something like this totally new, or is it possible that we've seen this exact same playbook run before?
Well, the event that makes this question so urgent happened back in 2026, and it was a huge deal involving the leader of Venezuela. This is where our modern story really kicks off.
Okay, so let's just walk through what happened, step by step. First, President Nicolás Maduro gets captured by the U.S. military. Then, he's physically removed from his own country, from Venezuela, and flown to the United States. And here's the crucial part. He's not just stuck in some military prison. No, he's brought before a federal court to face charges. It's that very specific process, capture, removal, and judgment by an outside power that we're going to focus on.
I mean, this brings up a massive question about how the world works, doesn't it? How is it even possible for one nation to just go in, grab the leader of another country, fly them halfway across the world, and then put them on trial in a totally different legal system? It really feels like something that could only happen right now in our modern world.
But what if it's not modern at all? What if what we're seeing is actually an echo, something reverberating from way, way back in the past? Let's wind the clock back and see if we can find this ancient pattern.
So here it is, the big idea for today. That exact sequence we just talked about, taking a leader, changing their status, and then judging them somewhere else, it's not new at all. In fact, it follows a very old historical blueprint. And this brings us to the two main characters in our story. On one side, you've got Nicolás Maduro, the 21st century president of Venezuela. And on the other, you have King Jehoiachin of Judah, all the way back in the 6th century BC. We're talking about two leaders separated by more than 2,500 years. Yet, as we're about to see, their stories are connected by the exact same political playbook.
So, where do we find this original blueprint? Well, you have to dig into a really ancient text, the biblical Book of Kings. And this isn't just some myth, it's a historical record of how a superpower back then dealt with a rival king.
Okay, so check this out. This is the key verse from the Bible, in 2 Kings chapter 24. The Babylonian Empire comes in and conquers Jerusalem. And the text says, plain as day, that their king captured King Jehoiachin and carried him captive to Babylon. The king is literally exiled by a foreign power.
Does that sound familiar? A ruler is defeated, he's physically taken away from his home and his people, and then he's held as a prisoner in the heart of this foreign empire? Wow, the parallels to what happened in our modern example are just impossible to miss.
All right, so we've got our two examples, one ancient and one modern. Now let's really tear this thing apart and look at the pattern itself, the actual blueprint of power that ties these two events together. Let's look at this side by side, phase by phase. Okay, phase 1. The enemy is overpowered. Jerusalem it's conquered. The Venezuelan regime gets removed. Check. Phase 2. Exile and removal. King Jehoiachin is taken to Babylon. Maduro is flown to the U.S. Check. Phase 3, and this is huge, a total status change. A king becomes a prisoner. A president becomes a defendant. And finally, judgment. The king has to face the authority of Babylon. The president has to face a U.S. federal court. See? It is the exact same strategy, step for step.
And you got to understand, this is not a coincidence. This isn't just random. This pattern keeps showing up because it's an incredibly effective strategy for completely neutralizing an opponent. It's just how power behaves.
So what's the motivation behind all this? You could call it the kingdom preservation instinct. It's this deep, fundamental drive that any power, whether it's an ancient kingdom or a modern government, has to protect itself. And it's not enough to just win the fight. The instinct is to systematically take apart the threat's entire base of influence and authority.
And that whole process of dismantling power, it happens through these 5 clear actions. First, you get the leader away from their home turf. Second, you strip them of their title. They're not king or president anymore. Now they're a prisoner or a defendant. Third, you control the story through formal charges. Fourth, you judge them in public to make the whole thing seem legitimate. And fifth, you use that judgment to make sure their influence is over, for good. So this entire blueprint, from the capture all the way to the trial, it's all designed to do one thing: to deliver a final, undeniable verdict. It's all about deciding who gets to have the last word.
Think about it. Through their courts, their laws, their sentences, what earthly governments are trying to do is write the end of the story. A guilty verdict, a long prison sentence, that's supposed to be it, the definitive conclusion, the final word on that person's power.
But here's where it gets really fascinating. The very same ancient source that gave us this blueprint for earthly power also presents this totally different idea. This verse from the book of Acts makes a competing claim that there's another judgment, a higher court that actually gets the real final say.
So this sets up two completely different kinds of verdicts. You've got earthly judgment, which is right here, right now, and often very political. Its goal is to just end the story. But then you have this idea of a divine judgment, which is presented as being ultimate, the one that matters in the grand sweep of history. It doesn't end the story, it promises a final, ultimate review of it.
So that leaves us with this massive question. As we watch this ancient blueprint of power play out right in front of our eyes in our modern world, you have to ask yourself, when all is said and done, whose verdict is the one that's truly final?